Chapter 7. The captains of Redwall looked to Constance for guidance. There was no question of overriding her commands. Of all the woodlanders, she was the oldest and wisest creature within the walls. The badger was slow-thinking and deliberate, but straight as a die. Her knowledge was born of vast experience, the natural cunning of a warrior. Jess, Winifred, and Basil stood solidly behind Constance. They had just related to her the latest piece of intelligence received. The attackers would emerge from their completed tunnels sometime around mid-afternoon. The badger thanked them and shook her striped head knowingly. She had not been caught off guard, thanks to Formal. Now, she would need the aid and specialized know-how of the mole leader to stave off this latest threat to the Abbey. Cluny the Scourge was still acting strangely. He sat in his patched-up tent at the far edge of the meadow and said nothing. Even when Kilconey marched jubilantly up with the news that the tunnel was within a fraction of being completed, Cluny sat and stared at the ground. He did not appear in the least moved by the good tidings. The ferret stood awkwardly, ill at ease, awaiting orders. Cluny sat unmoving, as if he had forgotten Kilconey's presence. The ferret tried once more.
"It's the tunnel, Chief. We'll have it ready by this afternoon."
The warlord looked up blankly. "Oh, yes, the tunnel. Well, carry on. You know what to do. I've got things to think about," he muttered absently. Outside in the meadow, Fangburn and Darkclaw listened in disbelief to the ferret.
"I tell you, he's off his rocker,"
said Kilconey.
"Sitting there like a stuffed dummy. Things to think about, if you please. Meanwhile, we've got the whole horde ready to go through that there tunnel and take the Abbey. What are we supposed to do?"
"There's only one thing we can do,"
replied the stolid Darkclaw.
"We've got to carry it through ourselves while the chief's not well." "Darkclaw's right," agreed Fangburn. "The three of us would take charge of the whole business."
They both looked at the ferret, waiting for him to express an opinion.
"I suppose you're right,"
Kilconey said.
"But listen, the rest of the army mustn't get to know about the chief, otherwise they'll desert. You know, I can't seriously believe that Cluny's out of his mind. Just you wait and see. It's probably just another grand old plan he's thinking up."
The trio of self-appointed generals marched down to the tunnel. They climbed inside to check upon progress. It was long, dark, and smelly. Weasels and stoats jostled past them carrying baskets of earth or dragging rocks and roots. Kilconey pointed out the finer details to his fellow commanders.
"Sure, we're right underneath the road now. The ground is good and hard. It didn't need any shoring at all. Now, see the footings of the wall. Mind your heads. From here I've had some props put in to hold the weight. Farther on the going gets really soft, but we've run out of decent timber. Still, I don't reckon it'll make a great deal of difference. If we move the army along fast enough, we should all be inside the Abbey before they know what's in 'em."
Above ground, a mole leaning his ear against a thinly beaten copper basin that was upturned on the earth listened carefully to every word the ferret was saying. He repeated it to Brother Walter, who wrote everything down word for word. Constance scanned the report and picked up her heavy cudgel.
"Before we know what's hit us, eh?"
she growled.
"We'll do some hitting of our own before the day is through."
From the southwest corner of the wall, moles had marked the exact run of the tunnel with 2 lines of cord and pegs. Formal and his team knew all there was to know about the diggings. Depth, approximate dimensions, the placement of shoring, even where the first rat's head was likely to break ground. The plan that Constance and Formal had jointly worked out would require very little hand-to-hand combat, much to the badger's displeasure. 2 oversized cauldrons of boiling water stood ready on tripods with slow fires burning beneath them to keep up the temperature. Constance and the beaver positioned themselves behind these, tipstaves at the ready. All available mice and woodland defenders were gathered in 2 groups on either side of the cord-marked aisle. They waited, looking to the badger for further instructions. To a passing stranger, it might have looked like some strange abbey ritual. 2 fires, 2 parallel cords, and all the serious-faced creatures gathered in 2 groups on the grass in the hot June afternoon, waiting silently. The armed ranks of the horde were formed up in the ditch. Fangburn marched up and down, issuing final instructions. It had not been an easy task getting them in line without Cluny there, but the persuasive tongue of Kilconey had assured them that the chief was aware of their every move and would deal with malcontents and troublemakers later on.
Pay attention now, Fangburn called. Darkclaw is up at the end of the tunnel. When the diggers break through, he will leap up into the abbey grounds. 4 soldiers are with him. They'll hold off any attack while the rest of us get up above ground. Now, once you're up, don't hang about. Make straight for the abbey building. Try to capture the mouse abbot. Darkclaw won't be with you. He'll take some warriors and fight his way through to the gate. Once it's open, the others will be able to get in. I don't need to tell you. These are not peaceful creatures we are up against. You've seen for yourselves, they've had a certain amount of luck to date. But they are determined fighters. So when you get up there, Cluny wants you to show them what a horde of trained soldiers can really do. Don't forget, the chief knows how to reward good fighters when it comes time to splitting up plunder.
Cluny had fallen asleep in his tent. He needed peace to clear his troubled mind. But peace was not easy to come by when the mouse warrior visited his dreams once more. Try as he would, Cluny could not evade the grim avenger with the sword. Shades of creatures that he had slain through the years came back to mock him. They got in his way, tripping him so that he stumbled and fell. Each time he would rise wearily and start to run again, the nemesis at his back, pursuing, striding, unhurriedly, never changing pace as the wraiths of his dead captains, Skullface, Redtooth, Ragear, and Cheese Thief hovered about, urging him to turn and face the warrior mouse. But he dared not turn. He kept running. The 2 weasel diggers thrust upwards in the narrow confines of the tunnel. They sprang aside as earth showered down and daylight poured in. With a seething press of soldiers behind him, Darkclaw stepped up to the waiting diggers. They boosted him upwards. He grabbed at the grass, his spear tucked under one claw. He stopped suddenly, his body halfway out of the hole. The first things he saw were 2 huddled crowds of small creatures. They stood either side of a double line of pegs and rope. Darkclaw grinned wolfishly. They were obviously playing some kind of silly little country game. He had caught them unarmed. A noise from behind distracted the rat. He swiveled around. He found himself facing 2 huge cauldrons which bubbled and simmered ominously over twin fires. Behind them stood the big badger and another strange-looking creature, equally well-built. Darkclaw set his claws against the ground to lever his body out of the hole. Before he could do anything to stop them, the badger and her companion tipped the bulky pots over. Darkclaw did not even get a chance to scream out a death cry. Boiling water cascaded down over his head in a hissing, steaming deluge. The force of the rushing water sent his body plummeting back down the hole. Endless gallons of scalding water hit the rats in the tunnels like a hellish tidal wave. The tightly packed rodents were instantly slain. On the surface, Constance cried out to the waiting defenders, "Jump in between the ropes, now!" The weight of combined bodies hit the ground between the lines. Constance began a steady chant. Jump, 2, 3, jump, 2, 3, jump, 2, 3. Under the constant pounding of countless feet, the whole area that had been marked out by the moles suddenly sank into a trench. The tunnel had collapsed. The defenders stood and cheered in the depression directly above what had once been Kilconey's tunnel. The badger gave the order to stop, Formal and his crew moved in to block off the hole with rocks and rubble. Friar Hugo ordered the cauldrons to be carried back into his kitchens. The abbey creatures fell silent and drifted away from the heap of stones which blocked the hole. A fitting headstone for a mass grave of the enemy. At the tunnel entrance in the ditch, Fingburn and Cluny were madly thrust aside as rats, weasels, ferrets, and stoats fought their way out of the tunnel.
Hey, what's happened?
Fingburn shouted.
Come back here this minute! Where do you think you're all going?
The defeated warriors ignored him. Caked with filthy mud and trailing broken spears, they dashed off along the ditch. Cluny peered into the tunnel. All he saw was the battered body of a stoat being borne towards him on what appeared to be a boiling wave of ooze. The ferret jumped backwards as the shoring burst, and the tunnel workings caved in, with a dull rumble of earth. As Cluny ran, another specter appeared in his fevered dream. It was a hideous-looking thing, covered in a dark, steaming substance. It stood barring his way with its arms stretched wide as if to embrace him. Cluny pushed it savagely from him. It moaned piteously.
Chief, it's me, Darkclaw. Look what they did to me.
Outside the tent, Cluny and Fingburn exchanged uneasy glances.
You dug the tunnel, so you go in first.
No fear, I'm only a ferret. You're a naturally superior rat. You'd better go first.
Shall we go in together, then?
Better not. It looks like the chief's asleep. He might not thank us for waking him up out of a nice dream.
Aye, that's true. Let's leave it until later.